morning, everybody. How are you? It is 9 o'clock on a Sunday, which means it's time for Lisa's Changing Perceptions with Lisa Affluent. Good morning, Lisa. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
We get started on this rainy, cold day.
Yeah.
It's not common that you wake up and it's 48 and then you find out it's going to be low 30s by the mid-afternoon.
No.
So we're plummeting instead of adding.
Yeah.
For those of you that are new to the show, thank you, because I hear that there's viewers increasing every week. So I have great gratitude for all of those who share and let other people know about it so that we can improve the show. I'm Lisa. I am a self-empowerment coach and a hypnotherapist. And I cover all kinds of topics on here, and every now and then we even go into the woo-woo. If you'd like to find me and check out the website, it's lisaschangingperceptions.com, or you can email me at lisaschangingperceptions@gmail.com, or you can always call or text 262-573-7055. And you can also find me on Facebook under Lisa's Changing Perceptions, or even at 216 The Net. There's a page there for me, or you can always contact Pete if you're trying to get a hold of me. So there's all kinds of alternatives. Jokingly, I'm going to say this morning I was asked before I left, Lisa, what's your show about today? And I was like, I don't know. Whatever Pete and I talk about before the show tells me what I'm going to do. And it's funny because it's just the way I've always done it. I guess I've led a very interesting life with lots of experiences. So, and I, like I said, I've done internet radio in the past, and I have just always talked. So it doesn't probably seem relevant, except for I guess I wanted people to know that everything I sit here and talk to you about is very genuine. It's very real and very genuine. It's life.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And by the way, Wendy Munson says, so great to see you already this morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I imagine she's doing good.
She's a loyal listener.
Yes.
She's a loyal listener. So this morning, Pete and I, in conversation, we kind of decided we're going to talk about dismantling the old beliefs. It's a huge topic. I actually deal with it in the office frequently. For the majority of us, it's the biggest problem, but we have it in different degrees. But real quick, before we get started with that, I want to bring up that next week, I'm going to have a guest. And my guest is going to be a recovering alcoholic who is very open about his story and the different types of ways he has sought through to find his way. And the reason he's going to come on is he's an incredibly genuine and kind man. Also, he has searched outside the box a little bit. So if even one person, hears some of the examples and things that have worked for him and finds one step closer to their peace, to their, place to be, then I think it's all worth it. And so look forward to that next week. I don't have the specific dates yet, but also in the next few weeks, we're going to be having a couple different guests on. A woman who has struggled with I don't want to say debilitating disease because it's not, it kind of is. She'll explain it, but it's a very difficult disease that is fairly rare. And she had been misdiagnosed for many years and went through a lot of emotional trauma over that. And her own life itself has been quite the roller coaster ride. And she is still about one of the most positive people I know of on the planet. So I'm going to welcome her to kind of tell her story and talk about her insights on that. I have been blessed to be friends with her for many years. She was actually my maid of honor in 1988 when I was married. So. But she has an incredible story, and she's just an incredibly wonderful and beautiful person. So she's going to be coming on, and I'm going to be having a distant guest from Colorado that we'll be doing a remote with. So there's some things to look forward to. And sometime I suspect in the next few weeks, the beautiful Mary will come back on and tell a little bit more of her story. And we'll talk about some of the things that have been going on with her, because she said she would actually be willing to do that. And I'm very proud of her for that.
Pretty cool.
So just things to look forward to. So dismantling the old belief system. This seems to be coming up in repetition lately, specifically in my office, in my personal life, in my other work that I do when I talk to people. Shattering the old belief systems is part of what I do with hypnotherapy, because as we've talked about before, for those of you new, I'll kind of go over it again. Hypnotherapy can be an accent to talk therapy. But what happens is that from birth, when we're born at birth, we are only born with two fears, and it is our fear of falling or our fear of loud sounds. And we also have what is called our fight or flight mechanism. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's our gut instinct that says, basically, stand here and do what you have to do or get the hell out. That's kind of what your gut instinct tells you what to do. And we follow that. And we could get into past life conversations that would alter that a little bit for this, but for these purposes, we're going to stick with science. Now, with exception, they have actually proven that if a mother is traumatized while pregnant, the baby can take on those energies of fear or those energies of trauma. So I'm letting people know I'm aware of that, but for this, we're going to go with the basic starting point, which is that we're born with the fear of falling, the fear of loud sounds. And then from birth until about 8 or 9 years old, we are human sponges. We are absorbing everything around us. We are absorbing what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what hurts our feelings, what makes us feel good, what makes us angry. We're just absorbing all these things around us, and it's absorbing into our subconscious mind or unconscious mind, because basically your unconscious mind's job is to keep you alive. So you're learning how to survive. You're learning survival mechanisms. So keeping that in mind, think about upbringings. Think about dysfunction within households. Think about traumas. Think about loss. Think about all the different things that a child could experience or a person could experience in childhood up until 8 or 9. And those things are all being absorbed and decisions are being made as to what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And then about 8 or 9 years old, we develop our critical mind, which is kind of like a filter. And it's a filter to our conscious mind. And your conscious mind is what you think with every day. Your conscious mind is what says, I have to get up today. I have to go do such and such today. And it's your conscious mind that you make those decisions with. Your unconscious mind is that little voice that argues with you about everything. Yeah. Your unconscious mind is that voice that says, when your conscious mind says, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go succeed. I'm going to go, make this radio station the biggest station in the country. And, when you get that excitement, that conscious mind makes that choice. And then that little subconscious mind says, but what if? But what if? Some people's conscious minds say, who are you to think that you can do that? If in a younger period of time, they were told they were not worthy, things like that. So in that aspect, this is usually what hits home in the office. If I tell you that when you have an argument, that little voice in your head that's saying, you can, you can't, you're good, you're bad, you look good in this, you look bad in that, whatever it is that voice is arguing with, take a breath and step back and ask yourself, how did I feel about myself and what was my environment when I was 8? And if you kind of really take a good look at that from the big picture and with an adult wise mind, looking at it from the big picture of how did I see myself and how was I seen within my dynamic when I was 8? What did I feel about myself? That's who you're arguing with. And that usually is what kind of hits home to people when they go, oh, that kind of makes sense. And a lot of people feel, but I got out of that. Of course, a lot of people work their way right out of it. But I'm talking about the little voice in your head that still battles with you, still argues with you, still tells you right, wrong, yes, no. And it has to do with everything in life. It has to do with love. It has to do with relationships. It has to do with loyalty. It has to do with trust. It has to do with money. It has all of it. All of it is where we got our basis from, because during that period of time, we were the sponge absorbing the truth of life and how to survive it. So that's why hypnotherapy can be a little bit different, because in hypnosis, and you are completely conscious and aware, and that's one of the reasons I'm anxious for Mary to come back on, because she can explain what that conception really ended up being. When you're under hypnosis, you're just incredibly relaxed. You think of it as kind of a meditation times 100. You're completely within your faculties. You can open your eyes and say, No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going there at any given point. I do not do, and I will repeat it a million times, I do not do stage hypnosis. I didn't even take the class in college. I had no interest in it. Also, just so that you're aware, stage hypnosis takes a specific personality type. There's testing that you do, and there's features and ways that people behave that you can tell that personality type. It is not a super common personality type. And oftentimes they have plants in those audiences in case that audience doesn't have enough that they can identify to call to the stage.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you know what? That'd be an interesting show too, is I'll go over the types of personalities. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong with those people. It's just a certain way that a mind works or a mind absorbs information. So it's not like there's something wrong with the people that it can be done with. It's just that they have a certain type of brain function and thought process that allows that to occur. And there's a few different types. You know, that would be an interesting show too, is to talk about the different dynamics, because within those different dynamics of the personality types, you also find relationships and why people see things. You know, the whole men is from Mars, women are from Venus thing. There's kind of a subconscious version of that, which doesn't have to do with male or female, but it has to do with thought processes and brain types. And so, you know what, maybe I'll do that on there. I'll do that on here one day. It's called, you're either an emotional person or a physical person, and it doesn't mean what you think it does. And then there's one that's kind of in between the middle, and that's the people that you can do stage hypnosis on. But anyway, for the record, I do not do stage hypnosis. I have zero interest in stage hypnosis, and I have zero interest if you can cluck like a chicken or bark like a dog or do any of those things. I couldn't care less. My true heart is help people find a way to find some peace. And it came up after the show last week with Kent when we were talking about instincts and inhibitions and how he realized that as a kid, you know, when we were talking, all of a sudden he realized as a kid that he had kind of veered into this direction a little bit, and that had been his comfort zone. And I was talking to a friend about it after the show, had listened to the show, and I said, you know, it's funny, and I didn't think to bring it up on the show, is when I was in high school, I was either going to be a social worker or a cosmetologist. That was what I wanted to do. And I even was a big sister in the Big Sister program when they used to do that with foster kids.
Wow. Okay.
When I was in high school. And I had determined my senior year I was going to go to college and be a social worker. And life took over, and I ended up engaged and then married, and you know, life happened, and I ended up taking the job at the animal hospital as a receptionist because I thought you just pet puppies, which is far from true. And I was just going to do that job for the summer because I had been in banking and I hated banking, but it was the family thing to do, and I hated it. And so I took a job at an animal hospital so that I could just figure out what I would do for a summer. And 14 years later, I was running the animal hospital, and it just kind of life took over. And so when Kent was bringing that up and I was talking to my friend, I realized that, you know what, it did kind of full circle, because although I'm not a social worker, granted, I went right back to that realm of my comfort zone when I was younger,
Sure.
which was support and counseling and, you know, helping somebody else up kind of thing. I just do it a little bit different. And I even work with teens. And if you would have told me even 10 years ago, Lisa, you were going to work with teens. Now, mind you, I had teens at the time.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, if you'd have said, and you're purposefully going to work with more of them, I would have said, yeah, right. I don't know what you had before you got here, but no. Yeah. And that is what I do. So I absolutely love it. And it does come full circle. Back to the hypnosis and the hypnotherapy is that if you stop and you think about what you felt about yourself, what you felt about your environment, what your relationship examples were, whether they be romantic or friendship, whether they be parental, you know, whatever it was, those things are teaching you relationship dynamics and what's appropriate. And here's the thing is that people say, no way, I grew up in a household where my mom and dad were always fighting and always this and always that. So I never want that. And it's interesting because that's your conscious mind saying you never want that. Because you know you don't. Your adult wise self says, no, I don't want any part of that. But the majority of people, if you talk to them, you will say, what type of people are you drawn to and what's your chemistry go towards? And they tend to still resonate with and find that chemistry, that attraction with people who are semi-toxic or who create that type of environment. Most relationships in the beginning all start out all foofy. I'm talking about, kind of down the road. As the dynamic starts, they start to go, this doesn't work. This person's doing this. I don't want them doing this because they were like my dad or they were like my mom or they were.
Yeah.
Because that little voice that learned back then says, that's what you want. That's what it's supposed to be. And your conscious mind is going, oh, no, I don't want any part of it. But that unconscious mind is saying, this is what I want. This is where we need to go. And it's because we learned. So with hypnotherapy, what we can do is we can get somebody relaxed enough. And I am not magic. Here's the other thing. Everybody is calling me and wants a one-hit wonder, 1 hour thing. Not my gig. I have had a couple clients that legitimately had an issue that we were able to resolve in one session. The majority of us, even those who hide it really well, we have stacked up garbage. And we're not going to make it all to the can in one trip.
Yeah.
I don't have another way to put it.
you need a multiple hefty bag.
and I mean, it doesn't mean it all has to be intense or horrible or what have you, but the truth is it's a layering effect, and it's a layering effect over life.
Yeah.
And we have to dismantle it, and that's why I titled it Dismantle It. We have to take down tier by tier. We have to take it down layer by layer. And as you do that, it becomes more comfortable. So, Pete, if you're carrying 20 garbage bags, your arms are tired and you're exhausted, right?
Yeah.
But if I come over and I take 2 or 4, which we can usually do in a session, we can make a decent, chunk, especially the first one. All of a sudden, it's a little bit lighter.
A little lighter, not so intense.
Right.
And you're like, hey, all right, this isn't so bad.
But you're still not going to be able to carry the other 16 by yourself.
No.
Not be comfortable. You're going to have to be dragging it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a
But
slow, long haul. Right. And then if in a week or 2, we take away another 2 or 4.
Yeah.
Our load's a little lighter. That's what I mean by dismantling. And we have to dismantle the old belief systems. And in a hypnotherapy session, while you're in hypnosis, you're relaxed enough to not battle your thoughts, to not battle it. So we can actually kind of think of it as a computer. We can actually plug in a new program and go, you know what? This program didn't work for me. If you got a computer system and you buy a program and you're starting to do it, and it could do what I want it to do, but it's really not taking me where I want to go. It's really not building how I want to build it. Then you would go out and you would reprogram a new system, right? You
Just
put it
uninstall the old stuff, install the new stuff, download it, and say, oh, hey.
And that's kind of what hypnotherapy is
better.
doing. Right. That's kind of what hypnotherapy is doing, is we're turning some of those negative thoughts into positives. We're changing those thoughts into positives. And sometimes, in some cases, like with dealing with addictions and what have you, is you're actually turning a positive into a negative. Because oftentimes with addictions, our comfort or our pleasure sensors or our coping skills or whatever have been taught and seen that that's a positive coping skill. Now, you may know in your conscious mind that it's not a positive coping skill, but when you were absorbing all those things, when you were your human sponge, what you were seeing was things get stressful. So when things get stressful, this is what people do. And that's why people, I love it when parents say, but I told my kid not to. Truth. You can tell your kids all you choose to.
No.
They will absorb what you do. They will absorb what your actions are. So if you would like your kids to behave differently, you need to behave differently.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. You can't say, like, I'm honest on the, I'm a smoker. Do I want my kids to smoke? Of course not. Could I scream at them if they did? No, but I'd feel damn guilty because I kind of set that example.
Yeah.
They could see change. They could see quitting. They've seen, just for the record, my children have seen good things from me too. But the thing is that we can talk until we're blue in the face. But if our actions don't represent what it is we're saying, nobody believes you. That's just the bottom line. And I talk to teens all the time, like, well, my parents said I needed to do this, that, and the other thing, and now I'm angry. Why are you angry? Because they don't do that. They didn't do that.
Well, they see it as hypocritical.
Right.
And that's a young age to deal and learn to deal with hypocrisy.
Exactly. Be the example. You know, I used to keep when my daughters were younger in their bathroom, I always had a little mirror that I bought at a coffee shop, and it had wording on it, and it said, be the change you want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's such a true statement, because what we reflect out is what will bounce back, what will return to us. That doesn't mean that we all have to be perfect. And anybody who thinks they are, we have a whole new set of issues to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody who sees perfection in themselves, then we have a whole other topic to deal with. But we have to become what it is we choose for them to see and be. And if we don't believe it, even if we fake it and we don't believe it, they will know it. Mm-hmm. And not just them being our children, but it's the people around us. I mean, how many people have you sat with and they've told you these wonderful stories about how great everything is and how great they were at this or that. And in your heart of hearts in that moment, all you can think of is, you're so full of it. And I just want to go.
Well, here's what I often sit back and see or hear is when people start talking about how wonderful things were. And it's usually, surprisingly to me, a lot of people live in those high school, college years.
Yes.
And I have a hard time understanding why, because here you are now. And maybe because when I reflect back, well, like my high school, college years weren't that great. They weren't. Right. They were fun times, but they weren't that great. So I really don't want to go live those.
Right, because your life experience has been that.
Yeah. Right. And in the now, holy crap, there are a lot of things that aren't great at all, but there are a lot of things that are really freaking fun and awesome. And it's hard for me to understand why other people don't go into the here and now. I mean, it's
not everybody's here and now.
Look what we can do. This is so much freaking fun.
Not everybody's here and now is that way. And yeah. That's the other thing, is that everybody sees life from their own ability, from their own perspective and from their own experience. So if we're that sponge, okay, up until we're, 8, 9 years old, if we're that human sponge, depending on what our experience is kind of how we see life. So you can flip that, because we talk a lot about trauma and we talk a lot about those things, okay? You can flip that. And this is what I'm starting to see now with some of the teenagers, is that there was also the flip in parenting styles. And I'm not criticizing any parenting styles. I'm giving an example just for the record, so no nasty emails. There was a change in parenting styles where discipline was different. And we were taught and told to reason with them. Let them know that they're special. Always let them know that they're special. Let them know that they can do everything. Don't discipline, just explain. And this is what starts to happen. We go out into the real world, and guess what? We're not the big quarterback, big guy on the football team, and we're not the head cheerleader, or we're not the scholar, or we're not the person that we were always told to be, and we've never had to face or experience disappointments or negative self-reflection.
No.
And here's the thing, the rest of the world isn't going to treat you like that. So you come out of that era, depending on how long it lasts, based on the situation, how long it lasts, with a very big misconception of self, with a very big misconception of how the world's going to see you, and with zero coping skills on how to deal with the emotions that come along with disappointment, being put down, criticism, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying there's a middle ground to me. There is a middle ground. Should we encourage our children? Absolutely. But we should also encourage them not to.
Right. So
there's encouragement is not only encouraging your children to the positive, but it's discouraging them to the negative. And that requires discipline. And a doctor actually taught me this. I had a child who there was a chemical issue that happened in her life. It's part of kind of what's pushed me along this path a little bit too. But she had developed an incredible case of germophobia. It was horrible, and I'd never experienced it, and it was horrible. And I was calling every doctor known to man. I mean, it was so bad that her sister had vomited we had 2 bathrooms, and vomited from the flu in one of the bathrooms, and she did not use that bathroom for a year because she was sure she would get the flu if she went in there. And it built, and it became so extreme. And I started buying paper plates and plastic cups and, anything, plastic silverware, just so she wouldn't be so afraid. Because if anybody was sick and had touched a plate, she had to know which plate it was. And she was never used. It didn't matter how much it was what. I mean, it was really extreme. And so I was crying. I mean, your child is suffering, and you just want to make them comfortable. And one of the greatest things that happened to me as a doctor was horribly mean to me. Horribly mean to me. And it is the greatest blessing. And if I could remember their name, which is sad, I can't. They were one of the greatest blessings in life. They completely annihilated me. And I called because I wanted to get her in this group program. I mean, you don't understand. I was trying everything and calling everybody. This went on for a couple years. I mean, it was traumatic.
Wow.
And I called this doctor that I was going to drive her 3 hours a day to get her to this program, like just whatever it took. And he bless his heart, he didn't know me, and he talked to me on the phone for about an hour. And he's like, "What's going on?" So I explained it to him, and I'm crying, and I'm, oh my God, and I'm doing all these things, and nothing's helping, and blah, blah. And he said, "You love your daughter, don't you?" I said, "Of course I love my daughter. So I'm doing all of these things." He said, "No, it's not." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I know you love your daughter, but don't attach doing these things to that." And I said, "What do you mean? I'm trying to make her comfortable." And he said, "Yes." And he was kind enough to say, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Here's the truth. The rest of the world, when she leaves home, isn't going to give a shit. So you're programming your daughter to live with you for the rest of your life and do exactly what you're doing. Now, what you need to do is this, and gradually require her to force herself to do what she's uncomfortable, little by little." And I said, "But she's going to be so upset. It's just going to hurt her and be so hard." And he said, "Yes, for the next couple months or for the rest of her life, you choose." And it was so harsh, but it was so true.
Yeah. Wow.
It was so true. And I guess it's part of the reason that I am the way I am when it comes to talking to people about these things. And I am kind of a blunt, put the truth out on the table type of person. Because, I mean, when he said that at the moment, I mean, you have no idea the wounds and triggers, and it was annihilating.
Oh, I could imagine.
Because my mental state was just, I was done. Like, I was just a pile of ick, just over it. And I thought, oh my God, I'm down, and he's like stomping on me. And once I got past the sting of what he said, and I really thought about what he said, I was never more grateful for a human being than in that moment. Because what he said was incredibly, incredibly true. And interestingly enough, now with what I do, this happened when she was about 9 years old. It started. So that's another interesting dynamic. But our style in dealing with somebody who's struggling seems to be one extreme or the other. It seems to be either completely annihilate them, beat them down, tell them that they're crazy, and disassociate with them because it's just too much work, too much drama. Or completely enable them, baby them, feel sorry for them, and cater to every single whim that they want. Because face it, for those of us in situations like that, sometimes it's just easier.
Yeah.
But it's also a non-fixing situation. And the middle ground is having an understanding and a compassion for someone's struggle, but also knowing there are boundaries, and the boundaries are not just for you. Because I hear so often, and I recently had a conversation like this where people say, but I love my child. Here's the reality, people. Most of us do.
Right.
Most of us do.
Yeah.
And when we're taking the easy road for us, that is not love. It's guilt.
Yeah.
It's guilt. So by showing them the example of change. Now, when my daughter went into therapy, I got my butt kicked a couple times in the therapist's office and was told, Mom, do you think you can meet us in the middle here? Yeah, I think I can. I'm not coming to her side. But yeah, I can meet in the middle. I can bend on that a little bit because you know what? I made mistakes in that too. You know, where I was like so then gung-ho of, no, we're doing this, that it almost became uncompassionate. So we're going to make mistakes along the way too. But those types of things and those decisions are what helps rewiring. And what people seem to not understand, or at least in my experience, has been that for somebody to be able to rewire and reprogram, yes, they need to make the decision to do that and be willing to do that. Very few people can do it without support of some sort. Hence, group meetings and things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean addiction. I'm talking about in general our behaviors. Some sort of support. And so it requires as much work from the person within the home environment or situation. Face it, mostly it's spouses or what have you, or other significant others that end up with that role. They need to have the in-between of compassion and understanding. And here's what's funny is I just talked to a client recently about this because we had a similar situation and we were talking about, she goes, I get so sick of being the one who's understanding and forgiving. I understand that topic. But what if the person that you're with has never seen the example of that? So it's the continual repeated example. People who have been traumatized or people who have been repeatedly mistreated or taken from or whatever seems to be the situation, they're not going to believe something just once. They're going to believe it's a ploy. They're going to believe it's a manipulation. They're going to believe you're trying to get them to think something. They're not falling for that again.
Right.
And so by continuing to repeat it, removing abuse. If you are abused, get the hell out.
Yeah.
Period. But so put that out there. Okay. But until somebody continually sees somebody repeating a pattern, they can't repeat the pattern themselves, whether they're an adult or whether they're a child. So people say, well, I know people who changed on their own. They did. I'm sure they have to. They have to make the choice to make that change. But they had to have seen the example of what they want to be at some point in order to decide they choose to go that road instead. They have to have that. And that includes tough love, which, when I had to do it with my daughter and I had to force her to sit at that table and eat off that plate because she saw. Now, I did things like I allowed her to wash it herself or see me washing it so that she knew it was clean.
Right.
But then at that point, you must eat.
Yeah.
You have to. And we did little steps like that. Slowly, it broke. But it took a while and it was a battle. And there's a couple years we did therapy for about 5 years. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy with a doctor named Dr. Brahm. I wish she was still in practice in the area. She was flippin' fabulous. But it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's basically facing it, dealing with it. And I drove many a weeks with a little girl in the back seat screaming how much she hated me and how horrible I was and what a vile mother I was and how could I do this? And sadly, my husband was the buddy of the house. My husband was the friend. So then she got to come home and Daddy played games with her because he felt bad. So we used to have a couple little wars about that. I was always bad cop. But every time she did that, don't mistake that it didn't break my heart. Still, sometimes today when I tell that story, when I'm talking in the conversation about it, I'll get teary about it because no parent wants to hear your child scream that at you.
No.
But my heart of hearts knew I have to do this. She has to do this if she ever wants to function.
And see, that is absolutely amazingly interesting because, I'm sitting here trying to think back as you're talking and how did I deal with our kids and such. And there were many times because I worked a lot. I still do. I'm gone from home every single day of the week. I spend time working out away.
Right.
But even when the kids were little, and my wife reminded me that there were days when she and Chloe wouldn't see me from the time they got up until he was in bed. They would be waking up at 10, 11 o'clock at night just so they could say hi before he went to bed at home. I'm like, I don't. And I felt bad because I didn't remember that. And then I'm thinking back, and yeah, you hate to see your kids cry. You hate to see them in pain. And our daughter, as brilliant and lovely a young lady as she is now, I can't believe I am so lucky to be her father, was the devil incarnate from the time someone flipped the switch when she turned 4. They flipped it to the back of the doll, evil. And then when she turned 12, they flipped it back to angelic.
Really? That's a weird age to go back to the time.
Yeah, and so we did not do the whole evil teen girl thing, but in that time frame, we walked around her like eggshells because you knew something, and you didn't know what would set her off into this blind, screaming rage and spewing, I hate you, I hate this, and slamming doors, and I'm like, you're gonna break my freaking house. Don't, just having that argument alone over and over and over again, until one day she's screaming on and on and on. I had my back turned, and I turned just enough to catch her doing this little smirky thing, like, I got him. Boom! I changed in an instant on that, and from that point forward, my wife.
When you realized she had learned to manipulate you.
Yeah, my wife said, "Your dad isn't going to fly for your nose, your fits anymore. When he says no, he means that you better just figure out how to deal with it." And so from that point forward, and she was maybe, sadly for me, she was maybe 9 or 10 at that point, maybe the age your daughter was. So I still had a few more years to go through, but I had lived all the way up from 4 to 9 with, dad being wrapped around that pinky on her, the boys, doing their best to convince us otherwise. But then again, once she turned 12, just the loveliest young lady, and now is phenomenally smart, incredibly intelligent. Just like everybody else has her things, but
you know what I'd love to ask her, and it would be an interesting conversation, is when in life now as an adult, although obviously her conscious mind has made choices, if there is a little voice in there when she's not getting her way, that literally she has to stop herself from like going, and stomping her feet and going, if I do this, this will work. It doesn't mean she'll act upon it, but it would be interesting to know, is there that little part of you that really wants to stomp and scream that you didn't get your way? Because she had learned a manipulation skill is what she had learned.
Yeah.
And you happened to catch it and realize, oh my, she's manipulating me. And it's funny because you use the slam the door example. And my daughters to this day, of all the disciplines that they ever had, will tell you that it was the worst, is if they slammed the door in anger. They had to open and close the door 25 times, counting out loud.
Why?
Doing it normally.
Oh my
and
God.
If I couldn't hear them, or if they slammed it once, they had to start all over again until they could do it 25 times to prove to me that they actually knew how to open and close the door. And it is so funny because to this day, they're both like, oh my God. So when what they referred to as my stepson was there one day and slammed the door, I had to teach him what happens in the house when you slam the door. My oldest had happened to be home from college that weekend. She goes, you made him do that? And I still cringed. And I'm like, of all the disciplines, why was that such a big stinking deal? But it was. And here's what's funny is that my, we'll refer to him as my stepson. He's a manipulator. He's a master manipulator. But what's funny is that it was always a rule for me that you did not write. And by about the third time, I was up in the kitchen and he had been in the basement with his dad, and he got mad about something and came up and slammed the basement door. And all of a sudden I just sat at the kitchen table and looked at him. And I didn't say a word. And he went, oh, 1, 2. I didn't even have to tell him. He just started counting. Like, here we go. And here we go with the door. And here we go with the door. Because if I don't do this, because I like to lecture. You can tell I like to talk. So I like to lecture. Because the other option was if they didn't do what they were supposed to, if my kids or his kids, oh, I'm sorry, did you guys need Lisa lecture to explain what they were? Okay, no. And you'd see him go stiff. And they'd be like, no, we'll just do it. But those are things that when things are done repeatedly, my point was that he was a really master manipulator and very used to knowing how to have a rage to get his own way. That was just a rule that wasn't broken. And that was an example in the house that didn't give. And I never had to speak. All I had to do was look at him, and he knew, all right, there's no give on this. This is just the way it is. And this is probably where I'll get nasty emails about what a horrible mother I was. But I believe in life charts, as we've talked about. And my daughters, when they were younger, every now and then would tell me I was the worst mother ever. You're the meanest mom on the planet, and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting. You chose me. If you look at it that way, you chose me. So maybe in your next lifetime, you choose better. But up till then, you got me. And they would just look at me and go in their room like, ugh. She makes me crazy.
And a little full disclosure here. You're one of your number one fans, who is Wendy Munson. Also happens to be my mom. Yeah, which you know. But she says, oh, what did I set Peter up for when I always told him you are the crown prince of the universe? Well, let me tell you. I discovered it's a fantastic job title that doesn't pay for crap here on Earth.
Did you ever, I know we've talked about the fact that before, do you recall anyway having a point in your life when you did go out into the real world and went, wait a minute, nobody else thinks this?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's a struggle with the coping skill to deal with that. And that's actually a great, thank you, Wendy, because that's actually a great example.
I had phenomenal levels of self-confidence that most people would probably describe as enormous arrogance, because
you're the prince.
I am the crown prince of the universe. How lucky are you here
to be in my presence?
Bow before me. That is 100% true. I was an obnoxious dillhole when I was, when I was a young man.
A dillhole is the new technical term.
Yes, it is. It's what I could think of at the moment right now to describe what I was back then and how I would describe someone like me. There is no reason I could think of at all for some time why people simply didn't bow before my feet. I had that level of self-confidence.
That is the perfect example. So thank you, Wendy, for bringing that up, because that is the perfect example. Because a lot of times when we talk about these things, we only talk about trauma and how trauma affects us later on. It can actually be the opposite as well. We can be over. And the conversation I had with my client recently was, they have a young daughter who's developing a bit of an attitude of problem, and they're about 6, so we're starting early, and they feel that the whole world should stop when they walk in a room. And I said, and how do you address it? He's like, well, that's my baby. That's my princess. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And I didn't say anything. And he goes, what? I said, I was just thinking. He said, thinking about what? I said, about how much you're going to have a son-in-law one day that hates you. I was just thinking about that. And he went, I better not. And I said, well, what are you bringing him? I said, have you ever met a girl, before he was married, have you ever met a girl who was really high maintenance and wanted you to bow to her every second and buy her everything she ever wanted? And oh my God, like she thinks you're just there to cater to her. And he goes, yeah, I hated those girls. I said, huh. And that's all I had to say. And all of a sudden he went, oh my God.
Yeah. And that goes, I learned an incredibly hard, abject lesson in humility at a young age. And now I am so happy that I did, because,
So you knocked your crown off?
in a big, big, hard way. Yeah. And yeah, both mentally and physically, it was not great.
And did it take a while to recover from that?
It did.
And during that recovery, this is actually a great example too. In that recovery process from that, how old were you, can I ask?
I was 18, 19.
Okay.
Around that age. So yeah.
In that
Luckily, it happened
recovery
early.
process, do you recall doing a lot of self-reflection and realizing, what was the word you used? Dill hole? That
Yeah.
you were a dill hole. And realizing not only the trauma of the discomfort and pain, obviously, that it caused physically, mentally, emotionally, but also, God, there's parts of
I'm going
me.
to say I was about 20 or 21.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
But was there also a time that you can recall where you were actually able to self-reflect enough to go, you know what, but parts of me suck. Parts of my behavior sucks.
Yeah.
And I can't behave like this anymore if I don't want this type of situation to keep reoccurring, if I don't want to repeat this process.
And it did very much. And I'm happy that it happened in my late teens, early 20s, because had it not been for that, I would have not been able to have the self-reflection, the understanding of what self-reflection was in my 40s, that have now made my 50s so significantly better in dealing with life in general than I have ever been able to do before.
Sometimes the universe, God, spirit, whatever you choose to follow with that, greatest gift to us can be the person that cares enough to break our heart.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in the take abuse way. Again,
No.
Just for the record, I will never mean that in a take abuse way. But sometimes, like whomever had taught you and knocked your crown off, here's the truth. People don't have to care enough to do that.
No.
People can walk away from it. Now, sometimes it's an anger and it just ends up happening, but I believe it can be a true gift. But people that tell you, and that's how the dismantling starts. Hypnotherapy helps to build that process, but here's the truth. Nobody's going to walk through my door until that experience happens, or until repeating the same thing over and over again becomes so uncomfortable. The wording I was trying to explain it to somebody I was talking with this week was, people are not going to choose to change until the fear of remaining where they are becomes greater than the fear of facing who they've been.
Mm-hmm.
Because change can't happen until we're willing to look at our part in our own demise.
Yeah.
Our role in our negative past. Now, those are things that people can face. This is what's interesting. People can face trauma easier than that. That's what I always find very interesting. People are willing to face trauma because within facing trauma, you can place blame. But when we have to look at our own role and our own actions and our own behaviors within the past, that's difficult. That is quite the chore. And sometimes the universe sends us somebody that says, all right, so here's the deal. Yeah. It's kind of what Kent and I were talking about, that whisper.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not listening to the whisper. Nudge.
No.
Oh, yeah, they're being stubborn.
And,
little push. Oh, they still won't do it. All right, we're going down now. Game on.
And
We're going to bring it.
Twice in my life, 20 years apart. So it was pretty much, you're not really paying attention, bub.
Right. And that's what Ken and I were talking about too. And last week we were talking is that even in that, and in self-reflection, when, there's people that say, oh, the world's against me, the universe, everything bad happens to me or whatever. If you really stopped and looked at it and stepped back and go, but did I kind of get warned not to do that? Did I kind of
Oh, yeah.
know I shouldn't have? Or, wow, did 10 great things happen and I didn't even bother to notice? Because I do believe in the energetic, what we put out, we get back. What people struggle with that with, and even I do sometimes, is that we want it instantaneous. Now, I've done some good crap for the last week and I want a miracle. You know, like, this is how we want it, and it's just not the way it works. But when good things are happening around us, and all we can hear is that little voice in our head, that little kid in our head, screaming, but bad things happen, just wait for it.
Yeah.
We miss it.
Yeah.
So we've got to start learning how to acknowledge the positive, learning how to see what is happening around us so that we can change that focus and send that energy out there. But we also have to know that that is oftentimes, again, a little wounded child or person screaming, don't fall for this, good things don't happen. Don't fall for this, you're going to get hurt. And we were talking earlier before the show of, you know, how oftentimes it's easier to think of worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And the only analogy I've come up with for that is that if you step outside of your house, you're standing on your front door stoop, looking out at the world, which is going to be limited. You've got trees and houses, right? So you're looking out. You can look out there and you can kind of envision or imagine what's out there in the big old world, but you're limiting your view a little bit, you know, so there's not going to be a lot of disappointment. You're limiting your view a little bit. You're just envisioning or imagining what might be out there.
Right.
Okay. So you're not looking forward to it because you don't know it's true. Okay. You don't know it's real. You can't touch it. You can't see it. You can't smell it. But if you climb up on the roof, you can now see a much bigger world. Yeah. And now you can smell it. You can see it. You can feel it. You can imagine it. You can imagine what's real. It's no longer an imagination. You can see that it's really out there for you. There's opportunity. There's new. There's change. Now, if you fall off your front stoop, you bump your knee a little bit. You're going to walk it off. You're going to walk away. It's not going to hurt that bad.
No. You
fall off the roof, you could be in some trouble. Yeah. You know, you could injure yourself. It's going to take a lot longer to recover. The pain is going to hurt more. You're going to be more afraid to go back up there again because you're going to remember that you fell. Life and emotional trauma and mental talk isn't really much different. If I stay down here and I only envision or imagine what might be out there, but I only focus on what's right here, it's not going to hurt so bad if I never make my quest.
No.
But if I go up there and I can see that there really is a quest, there really is an opportunity, there really is something greater and bigger, and there might be something wonderful out there for me, and then I what if it doesn't happen? Then that's going to really hurt. And it's going to take me longer to recover. And then I'm going to be afraid to try it again. And that's where we get stuck in the cycle. That's where I'm only going to think the worst kind of comes in. You're looking at the screen like
yeah, I do, and I actually was just waiting for a little break in your thought there.
There's very seldom one.
Yeah, I know that's why sometimes I'll wait, but sometimes I just have to jump in there. Yesterday, Sandy Gibson says, yesterday I went to a funeral. I was so very melancholy, but those kids that used to hang out at my house thanked me for being me. I am eternally grateful. So she went to a situation, it sounds like, where she wound up getting something that she needed.
Right. And the universe or spirit, like I said, I'm going to say spirit. You guys apply whatever you want to always. Puts us where we need to be. And oftentimes when we go where we need to be, it's a gift for us and it's a gift for others. And that energy flows. Because in that situation, I know Sandy, so I can talk about this, but in that situation, her melancholy got to be raised up, and she's dealing with her own issues in life right now, and she got to have that little voice get shut down a little bit because other people are telling her, you're not what your little voice is saying.
Yeah.
And that changed her energy dynamic. So now this is how the cycle of energy works. So now she left there with a much higher vibrational energy, with a much more positive energy. So every person she came in contact then for the rest of the day, got a higher vibrational, happier energy, and she probably approached that person differently, even the stranger. When you're feeling good and you're feeling confident and, you walk into a store and you grab the door for somebody and say, hey, how are you? But when you're sad or upset, you don't do that, right? Your head's down. You're kind of doing your own thing. Maybe you're in anger. So that whole vibration, not only that blessing that she received is not only just a blessing to her, but it could also be a blessing to the next 20 people she runs into.
Yeah.
And when we step back and we realize what we put out and what we do and the choices and how we make the choices that we make affect so many other people, that can also these are all just little tools, another way to realize what we're doing. Because I did an experiment with the teens that I'm working on, and it had to do with your energy, your aura energy that's around you. And I can't do it without a second person here, and I'll do it, but I will do it one day. Your auric energy around you. And I had them go quiet, and we did a slight meditative thing, and we brought the aura in and we brought it out because you have control. You can change how big and little this bubble becomes. And of course, they thought I was just, the crazy lady. So, all right, it's cool. We're going to talk about this, then we're going to do an experiment. And I have them, and I've done this with adults too, but I have them back to back, and then they step 5 feet each. So they're back to back, about 10 steps apart. And I have one of them remain facing and the other one turn around. And I tell this one, make your bubble really small. And this person very quietly, they have to take off shoes if we're indoors. I'll say, tell me when you feel them. Tell me when you feel them. Because, we feel when somebody's creeping up on us, right? We feel that's because they're in our energy field. And they'll end up getting really close. And I'll go, okay, stop. Turn around. And they'll be face to face. And they'll realize, I didn't feel them until they were right up on me. And then we'll do it again. And I'll go, okay, now make your bubble big. Make your bubble so big, strong, powerful. Instead of this lovey, and it's great. And just, get them all vibed up, something like that. And you'll literally see there's feet difference between when they feel them coming. Now, for the record, they're teenagers, so I'm smart enough. I trick them sometimes. I'll have somebody not start walking when I'll go, okay, start. And I'll hold them back. And then I'll have them walk, or I'll have them walk faster, or before I say it, signal them to prove to them, the person, that this person doesn't know their bubble's bigger, so they have to say it sooner. So I'll play with them to prove this is really how it works. And it's that auric field, it's that energy field. And part of when people are dismantling or trying to wire their thought process of their own, sometimes if we can get the reflection outward to realize that how we are and what our energy is does affect the people around us and how they behave. It's just another tool to keep us in check. Because sometimes when we're trying to change or rewire something or change a behavior or habit, whatever, we have to, we have to be reminded all the time and have little tools that remind us. So I just realized we're at 2 minutes because I just said stopping me from talking is never going to be.
So, no, it's never going to be an issue here for the show. We've always got plenty for the hour that you fill. So I'm actually incredibly grateful for that. So, but why don't you go ahead and remind everybody how they can reach you?
I'm Lisa, and I'm with Lisa's Changing Perceptions. You can find me at lisaschangingperceptions.com. You can find me at lisaschangingperceptions@gmail. You can also find me on Facebook, or you can call or text 262-573-7055. I am a self-empowerment coach and hypnotherapist. And I also do energy working and what have you with people. So there's a variety of things. You can check out the website. If you have any questions, feel free to call, or you can always find me on the station, 216 The Net.
Every Sunday at 9 a.m. Central. So what do you think? We have a guest next week.
We have a guest next week. It is going to be somebody who's a recovering alcoholic who is a very kind and good person who's looked at some alternatives outside the box, and he's going to open up and share to hopefully even one person hears something that might help them take one step further.
Awesome. All right, folks. So until next week, this has been Lisa Efflett, your host with Lisa's Changing Perceptions. Have a fantastic Sunday.
Bye, everybody.